I welcome you all for today's session. Today, we are extremely honored and privileged to have Mr. Tejasvi Surya as the speaker for the day. Currently, Sir is the Member of Parliament from the Bangalore South constituency, where our own IIM Bangalore is located. He holds the distinction of being one of the youngest MPs in Lok Sabha at the age of 28 years. He won his seat with an unprecedented vote share of 3.3 lakhs vote. He is the national president of BJP Yuva Morcha, which is the youth wing of BJP. Before entering into politics, he completed his graduation in LLB from Bangalore Institute of Legal Studies. Today, the topic of discussion is management lessons from governance and role of youth in nation building. I would like to request Sir to first put his thought, enlighten us with his thought, and post the completion of his talk, we would have a Q&A session. Thank you very much. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Shubham. Good evening to everybody. Namaste. Yeah, am I audible now? Is it okay?
Yes, sir. You are clearly audible.
At the very outset, I want to wish all of you a very happy Gandhi Jayanti as well as a Jayanti of Lal Bahadur Shastri ji. I want to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to talk to all of you on this very interesting and very relevant topic of how we can draw lessons of leadership or management from politics and governance. Friends, at the very outset, I would want to put a very clear disclaimer that I am a very young political activist. I have a very limited experience in electoral politics of just 2 years. But I have been in the space of political activism from the last decade or more. And one of the biggest blessings of my life has been to have seen from close quarters one of the most successful and inspiring and popular political leader in the history of humankind. That is our Prime Minister Narendra Modi. When I say that he's the most popular leader in the history of humankind, it is not an exaggeration, because the highest number of votes ever polled in any democratic election ever was in the 2014 and 2019 elections, and it was the Prime Minister who won both these elections with a thumping majority. And you know how complex India is, both in terms of its governance structures and in its political system. So it is a Herculean task to unite a country and be a leader who is accepted from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, Kamrup to Kutch, in all languages by people of all regions, and it is a phenomenal feat. So one of the most amazing things that I have been blessed with in my life in the last few years is to very closely see and experience the work of the Honorable Prime Minister. So a few points that I would want to highlight today is also the lessons or the administrative or leadership style that I have seen and observed in the Honorable Prime Minister and his style of functioning as well. In addition to that, I would also want to draw upon my own individual experiences and try to relate with all of you by telling before you a few examples. Friends, I want to be as brief as possible so that we will have enough time for our question answer session. So I will want to restrict myself to 10 important points which I think are relevant for any person who aspires to be in a leadership role or to be in the role of a manager or a leader. And whether it is in the field of politics, whether it is in the field of business or any other social enterprise, all these 10 principles will be of extreme importance while leading a team or managing a group of people. Having said that, certain examples I may give may be relevant only to the field of politics and governance, and may not be relevant to you. It is upon you to choose and pick what you think is relevant for your field of work. Friends, the most important role of a leader, the most important ask from a leader is the ability to inspire a team. The most important role that a leader has to perform is to inspire and motivate the people who he commands, people who work with him, and people who look up to him. Whether it is a small team of people, whether it is the teacher in a classroom, or whether it is the prime minister of the country, the very first and foremost responsibility of a leader is to inspire and motivate others. And you can motivate and inspire others only when you follow a few principles. One of those principles is that the leader must always practice what he preaches. A leader can never be seen to be preaching something and practicing something else. This conflict in practice and action, in words and action, will result in the team or the people who he aspires to lead in losing confidence in his leadership. This is a very important aspect. In addition to this, the leader must always strive to be the ideal. And when we say ideal, we must remember that idealism is what inspires people. Because idealism is not very easy for everybody to achieve, which is why it is difficult. And it is only through idealism that you can inspire fellow men and women. Whether it is leading a life of integrity, honesty, commitment, great amount of discipline, and most importantly, sacrifice. All of these aspects are what makes people look up to a leader. Therefore, in addition to practicing what you preach, the leader must always lead by example by following a life of idealism. It's only then that a leader will be accepted as one by the people who he intends or wants to command and lead. This is the very first requirement. And my dear friends, there can be no compromise or negotiation on this aspect. If we look at the Prime Minister today, if you look at leaders like Martin Luther Jr., if you look at Mahatma Gandhi, whether it was Lal Bahadur Shastri, we will find in their lives that they stuck to extremely difficult ideals and tried to live up to it every single day. We will know that they made efforts to practice what they preach, and the distance between the spoken word and the acted deed was not different. These, I think, are the most essential qualities as a starting point, the eligibility criteria from where you can start. The second important aspect or lesson that we can draw is that the leader must always have the big picture of the team and the cause in mind. And it is essential for the leader to always articulate the big grand vision for the group. Whether it is in product development, whether it is, say, in revamping a defunct website, or whether it is even to give direction and vision for a country. It is extremely important for the leader to articulate a grand and clear vision. And this big picture thinking will not only help the leader make the right decisions, but it will also instill in every single participant in the process a sense of grandness and a sense of purpose which is beyond one's own career growth. Friends, what do you think is the motivation for political activists of the Bharatiya Janata Party? We are neither paid a salary, we are neither, especially, at least today, young activists like me are blessed to have been, blessed to be working in an environment where We are in power at the center. We are in power at so many states. But a few years ago, leaders of my party struggled and worked their entire lives, even when they knew that they did not stand a chance of getting even remotely close to power. But how did they motivate the team, the organization? How did they get the people working with them, walk along with them, come the distance with them? We must always remember that if the people in our team will be motivated by the salary that they will get at the end of the month, then you cannot, with that kind of a team, build anything great. So if you want to build anything great, if you want to achieve something bigger or grand in nature, then always instill in your team a sense of large purpose, which is beyond a paycheck, beyond a person's individual growth. So it is extremely important for a leader to have a big picture vision, clearly articulated to the team, so that the team will feel that they are working towards a grand vision, which is beyond their paychecks, beyond their immediate personal needs. Two, most importantly, that various stakeholders in the team will not then work in silos. They will all work in a coordinated, integrated manner, so that they will know that all of us are doing our bit to achieve the grand vision. So it is extremely important for the leader to do these two things. The third important aspect that I feel that we must draw lessons from, whether it is governance or politics, to remain relevant, one would need constant learning and updation of skills on an everyday basis. Friends, this October 7th, the Honorable Prime Minister will be commemorating 20 years in public service as the head of an elected government. For about 12 to 13 years, close to 12 years to 13 years, he was the head of the state of Gujarat as the chief minister. And for about 7 years, he's been the head of the country as the elected prime minister. Right? So it's not easy for anybody to be at the helm of affairs for 20 long years in a field as versatile and as dynamic as politics and still remain relevant. Especially in an age and time like today, where movie stars get bored. I mean, people get bored of watching movie stars after 2 or 3 movies. If you hear a playback singer, 3-4 songs, and you feel the need for a new fresh voice, right? An author, 2-3 movies or books later, you find, okay, I am finding a repetition in the kind of storyline, so I want to read a new author. When the world is so dynamic in nature, people's demands are constantly changing. Imagine how difficult it is for a public leader who is always in the limelight, whose speeches, whose written word, whose spoken word, whose dress, whose hairstyle, to whose beard, to clothes that he wears, everything is under public scrutiny. Imagine if the person has to stay relevant for 20 long years. How difficult that must be. The only way that a product, a company, a leader can remain relevant is through constant upgradation, constant updation, and constant learning. And by learning, I also include unlearning a few things, because learning and unlearning goes hand in hand. Just like how every year there is Apple 10, Apple 11, Apple 12, Apple 13, there must ever be a constant effort from our side to update ourselves and make a constant progress at remaining relevant. By this, I mean, if it needs us to learn a new language, if it means we have to learn a few new skills, if it means we have to learn a few technological skills to be updated. All of these must be done. And let me tell you, my dear friends, you and I, we are living in this generation where the pace of change is at a staggering speed. If you will compare our generation with, say, a generation, say, even 30, 40 years ago, the pace at which things were changing were very different. The world was a much slower world at that time. It was moving at a much slower pace. But today, because of advancement in technologies, especially at technologies, digital technologies like AI, ML, and all of these things, the pace at which the world is changing is extremely fast. Gone are those days where you will get out of the college at, say, 23 or 24 with a degree, get a bank job and do it till 60 years until retirement, and know that you also have a retirement package waiting after you retire. We are not living in that world anymore. If you read new papers that are coming out on the jobs of the future, you will realize how it is imperative for us to be constantly updated on the new skills, new technologies, so that we are on top of things as and when the world is changing. So I think one important lesson that we must draw is to remain relevant if we have to stay alive. If you are stagnant, you are dead. This is the lesson. If you are relevant, you are alive. If you are stagnant, you are dead. Whether it is in politics, whether it is in governance, or whether it is in business. This is a principle that is universal. Friends, the other important lesson that one will have to draw is about the ability to work with a team. And when I say that the ability to work with a team, one must always remember that in politics, more than other fields, you will not always have the luxury of choosing your own team. Right? You may be a startup founder and you will decide, I will have 3 people in the team. If you like somebody, you will keep them in the team. If you don't like them, you will, fire them. If you are the boss of a business. But that's not how it works in most companies, most organizations where you go and join a part of. And it certainly is not the case in politics. A team is chosen for you, and you are a part of a team. And you will have to work with people of different attitudes, people of different cultural mores, people of different language, religions, attitudes, aspirations, everything that is different from you. And if you cannot work in a team as a member of the team, being an integral part of the team, you will not be able to contribute or add value. And remember, if you will not be able to add value and bring value to the table, you will remain irrelevant. Only when you add value to a team, only when you add value to an organization, only then will a dependency be created on you. So you will have different members who you have to deal with. You may not always like the person. You may not always like the way he speaks, the way he looks, the way he talks, but you will still have to accept everybody and work towards a larger cause. And that is a very, very important trait that one will have to live with and understand as a reality of life. In politics, many a times, you will have people in your team who may not always wish the best for you, but you will still have to work with them. And if you get a chance to make a team in politics, the general, if you look at good leaders and if you look at great leaders, the difference is this. Great leaders will always try to surround themselves with people who are better than them. Because people who are better than you will drive the best things out of you. They will bring the best out of you. And if you surround yourself with lackadaisical, mediocre people, you will also be reduced or dragged down to mediocrity. There is a very interesting book that I read recently called The Team of Rivals. It is about how Abraham Lincoln, upon becoming the President of the United States, chose his cabinet. And who were the people that he chose to be a part of his cabinet. The people who he chose were the ones who had run against his who had ran against the presidential campaign, when ran against his presidential campaign, who were his competitors essentially for the presidential ticket. And why did he do that? Because he realized that those men were men of great caliber, men of great integrity and capability, and because they could add great value to the larger cause that they were working. So when you are a part of a team, know that it is very essential to work in the team, irrespective of who is working with you, whether they like you or not, because the cause and the vision is always important than your individual, liking, non-liking, etc. Two, if you get to make a team, then always remember to surround yourself with people who are better than you, people who are more capable than you, because they will bring the best out of you. Third, when you're working in an organization, many a times you will always understand, you will always feel that the organization may take a position collectively which may not be in sync with what you believe. It happens, right? You would have given a suggestion to your boss or your team, but collectively the team will decide that they would want to do something else. Unless that decision of the team is repugnant to your core philosophy as an individual, then know that you will have to work with the organization decision as the final decision. That the collective decision of the organization is more important than your individual liking or individual will. There was a very interesting letter that I was reading of recently by a general who led the American forces to victory during the Second World War. He was asked, what is the secret of success in an army? He said, give your suggestions, but once the decision is made, follow the decision. And if the decision that the organization has made is contradictory or opposite, or is different from what your suggestion was or your liking is, then make sure that you make even more effort to follow the organization's decision. But I have already caveated this by saying that unless the decision is repugnant to a core philosophy that defines you, makes you as a person, then you walk away. But until then, follow the organization's decision. That is when you become a person of the team. This is the fourth lesson. The fifth lesson that one can draw is, as a leader or as a manager of a team, you will always have to make decisions, right? Making decisions is an important part of your responsibility as a leader. And this is where the difficulty comes. How do you make decisions, right? People struggle to make the right decisions. So one way of making the right decisions is this. If the leader always makes decisions based on objective, impersonal, and selfless factors, then the team will always be with the leader. That is when the team will respect the leader's leadership, and the leader will in turn earn the loyalty of the team. It is extremely easy to make these decisions theoretically, but very difficult to do practically. That is where the test of one's integrity and character come, which is again linked to the very first point that I said, that to be a leader, one has to live the life of an ideal, life of difficult idealism. There is no compromise, there is no shortcut. So always when you're taking decisions, I feel there are two important factors that one will have to consider. Today, there is an interview that the Honorable Prime Minister has given to the Open magazine. I have tweeted about this interview, and I will also request all of you to kindly spend 20 minutes of your time today reading the interview in whole. It is a great interview, fascinating in every way. So many lessons of leadership inherent there. There, the Prime Minister says how he takes decisions, and I want to read out from there. I quote, I have attempted to live a life where I walk on a knife's edge every day, experiencing and living every issue concerning the people. I had promised three things to people when I came to power. One, that I will not do anything for myself. Two, I will not do anything with wrong intention. Three, I will create a new paradigm of hard work. These three things, if you think about these three things deeply, you will realize how philosophically right all of these three things are. If a leader, let me give an example. You are a manager in a team, and you will have to take a decision whether it is the outing of a team, whether it is making a product decision, or whether it is a purchase decision. If you have a vested interest in it and you make that decision based on that vested interest, then that immediate surrounding leaders, the people who are seeing you, they will know that even they can take decisions based on self-interest. And that's when you will lose your legitimacy and authority as a leader. But if you, while making those decisions, make them with a spirit of selflessness, objectivity, the larger picture in mind, and what is best for the team and organization, then your decision will be accepted by all. This is the another important lesson. And then the other important lesson that is connected with decision making is that when you take decisions, especially when you are a leader, not every decision that you take will be appreciated and accepted or liked by all. Right? The Prime Minister takes bold decisions like demonetization, whether it is the farm laws, whether it is surgical strikes. These are all big calls to take. Not everybody is on board many times. But how does one make these decisions? The rule is very simple. Always make those choices which will result in the greatest good for the greatest number of people. The only yardstick that matters. If the decision that you are taking is objective, if it is selfless, and if it is taken with the intent of helping the greatest number of people and bringing them the greatest amount of joy, then you are taking the right decision. This is another important aspect of leadership lesson that we can draw. Then, if you are in politics and in public life, or if you're a leader, whether it is, because politics is as pervasive as oxygen, it is as pervasive as, air. If there are 10 people in a team, then there is politics there. And when we say politics, we generally assume politics to be, a power struggle within the group, etc. But politics can also be a means to achieving a larger objective. But when you are in a group of 10 people, it is only natural, because it is only human, that a few people will like you, a few people will admire you, a few people will be jealous of you, a few people will be will not wish the best for you, right? And whether it is in a team or whether it is in a democracy, you will always have opposition. Opposition is good, but when you are in public life, we must always remember it is important to have a thick skin for allegations, but a very sensitive ear to criticism. I will repeat this line again. When you are in a position of leadership and when you take decisions, a few people will like it, a few people may not like it. And the moment you take these decisions, a few people will say A, B, C, all of these things. But you must always remember to have a thick skin, develop a thick skin for allegations, but always have a sensitive ear for criticism. What is the difference? Allegation comes or is made from a position of malice. It is made from a position of not wishing the best for the cause. It is made from a position of vested interest. While criticism is made from a position of wishing the best for the larger cause. Let me give a more political example. The opposition in the last 7 years has tried every single thing in their kitty to manufacture allegations of corruption against the Prime Minister. One after the other, they tried and it has fallen flat. Rafale, whether it is, the Ambani-Adani thing that they keep shouting, whether it is any of these things, right? Vaccination, to everything. All those are allegations. Why? They are done not with an intent of giving a positive feedback, but they are done because either out of jealousy or other malice or a much lesser pious intent that they are out of power. Whether it is a personal allegation or whether it is a public allegation, know that when you are a leader, when you are in public life, allegations will always come your way. And if you will start giving heed to every single allegation, you will not be able to walk the path. So have a thick skin for allegations. But at the same time, it is extremely important for a leader not to confuse allegations to positive, constructive criticism. That is where your individual wisdom comes. So the yardstick to ascertain what is criticism, what is positive criticism, and what is an allegation is very simple. If the person making it has the larger interest of the cause, larger interest of the organization in mind and is making that criticism, then know that he is doing it from a good place and respect it and be sensitive to it and act upon it if you can. But if the guy is making it from a position of vested interest, then know it is an allegation and throw it away and march on. So this is another important lesson one would have to draw from politics in public life. Then it is also important for a leader to focus always on the process and not the outcome. Friends, this is a lesson that we all have to focus in life. The great philosophy of Karma Yoga in the Bhagavad Gita is a universal philosophy for everybody, whether it is our personal lives, whether it is our professional lives, whether it is public life, anything. Even yesterday, I was watching a very interesting interview of Mahendra Singh Dhoni, which was going the rounds on social media. In that interview, he says, the only thing that we must focus on are the things on which we have control over. Everything else is beyond our control. Friends, there are so many variables in this world, right? If you look at it, whether it is in your personal life or whether it is your career, there are always more variables that you deal with than constants. So what is it that you must do? A, to be happy, and two, to actually lead a fulfilled life. Always have a razor focus only on the process. What happens is not in your control. Did you give your 100% to the process every day? If you did, then you will sleep happily and you will know that you gave your 100%. If you start obsessing about outcomes and not being committed to the process, then you will neither have good process nor have outcome. It will be a failure. So always focus on the process and not the outcome. This is another important lesson. Then I will go back to what the Prime Minister said, the 3 points. 1, I will not do anything for myself. 2, I will not do anything with wrong intention. And the third thing the Prime Minister said today in the interview was, that I will create a new paradigm of hard work. This is what he said. A leader needs to be hardworking. There is no shortcut to this. And to be very honest, my dear friends, let me tell you. Generally, the assumption outside is that political leaders while away their time in resorts, parties, have fat bellies, they don't do much hard work, etc. But I will tell you very honestly, if I have seen anybody, any profession, put in the maximum amount of hours, it is, and work the most hard on what they do, it is the political class. When you enter politics and public life, you will have no personal life, because people are the masters of your time, and you are constantly trying to do 20 different things at the same time, and all of that will require tremendous amount of hard work. When you're leading a team, and when your job includes execution of things and not just thinking or ideating, then it is extremely important for you to work hard. There is no other way. You will have to be a person who is hands-on and knows what is going on. We just recently saw how the Prime Minister came back from United States after a long flight for 4 long days. He had meetings, they came back, landed, had 3 meetings through the day and night. Lo, he was seen inspecting the construction site of the new parliament. Just that one picture made millions of people in India energized and inspired them to work hard. So there is no shortcut to hard work. And if you have to work hard, you will have to have 2 things. You will have to have immense physical strength and mental strength. To achieve these 2 things, one will have to have a lot of personal discipline in life. Friends, I will tell you something from my own personal experience. I have seen leaders like B.S. Yediyurappa, our former Chief Minister of Karnataka. I have also seen from close quarters a very senior minister in the Karnataka cabinet, who is a minister from my constituency, called V. Somanna. And we see the Prime Minister. They are in advanced ages of their life. They are 70 years old, 72, 73 years old. They put in 17 to 18 hours of work every single day. Imagine from where they must be getting that energy. And I have noticed that in all of them, I have tried to inculcate these things myself, and I found it hard. When I've seen these people's lives from close, I have seen that no matter what, they always find time to find time for themselves. Whether it is waking up at 5, whether it is waking up at 4, whatever it takes, they will exercise. They will always maintain a spartan diet. They will always mind what they are eating, what they are how they are taking care of their bodies. They will spend time on, say, yoga, meditation, pranayama, some other thing. Because if you have this tool strong with you, it's only then you can do everything else. If this tool fails, everything else fails. So what is connected with hard work is intrinsically linked with hard work is the physical and mental strength of the human body, which is the most important tool. Kalidasa very beautifully had said, Sharira Madhyam Khalu Dharma Sadhanam, which means Sharira, the body, is the most important tool to achieve all of these things. So it is extremely important for a leader to have personal discipline to maintain this very important tool called the body, physical, mental health, to enable one to do hard work. The last process, the last 2 ones that I have left, I had 10 points, I am at point 8 now, is this. Friends, it is always important for a leader, especially one who is in politics in public life, to respect the intelligence of the people. And if you are a business leader, it is extremely important for you to value and respect the intelligence of your customer. Do not ever, out of your arrogance, make the mistake of underestimating the intelligence of the people or your customer. He knows the best. For example, if you ask you may have observed this statement by a few political leaders after elections, especially after they would have lost an election. Why did you lose the election? They will say, no, the electorate is not educated. They are not ready, right? They didn't make the right choices. No, it is not about them not making the right choices. It is about you failing to convince them about what is right. Essentially, the job of a politician, the job of a public activist is to sell his idea, is to sell his dream, his version of an agenda, just like how you will sell a product. If a customer will reject you, it doesn't mean the customer is dumb or unintelligent. It means that you are incapable of successfully selling it to him. When the Prime Minister started the Swachh Bharat mission and promised to build crores of toilets across the country, people said, do you really think people in rural areas will use these toilets? They will use it as storage tanks and they will still go out and defecate in the open. The opposition made a mistake of arrogantly assuming that the people are unintelligent. But today, the Swachh Bharat mission is a revolution in the country. When the Prime Minister introduced digital payments, the Jan Dhan account, Aadhaar, and seeding it with mobile phones, UPI, the instant reaction was, India is a rural country. You think the village folk in India will start using mobile phones to make digital payments? In which world are you living? Did they or did they not make this allegation? But what are we seeing today? India is surpassing China in the number of UPI transactions that the country is making on an everyday basis. Right? So always trust the intelligence of the people who you serve. If you are in politics, trust the intelligence of the general public. Know that Jan Shakti is more important than Raj Shakti. And if you are in the business of selling a product or a particular service, know that your customer knows best. So you need to ensure that you will pitch in such a way that you will win over the customer. It's incumbent on you and not on the customer. Lastly, my dear friends, the most important lesson is this. In fact, even last night I was thinking about something like this and I tweeted. For all of us in life, it is extremely important to have clarity on what we want to do in life and not what we want to become in life. There is a world of difference between the two. When you focus on what you want to do in life, then you will focus on the cause and not the office. You will focus on the idea and not the title. You will focus on the larger interest and not what it personally brings to you. This is extremely important for anybody who wants to walk a path that is not treaded by people earlier. Courage of conviction to walk the path that is not walked earlier by people comes only and only with a firm belief in a large idea that means everything to you. And what is courage of conviction? Courage of conviction means if the whole world will go against you and nobody will want to walk with you and stand with you, even then, if you believe what you think is right, you will walk alone. Rabindranath Tagore so succinctly put this when he said, Ekla chalo re. Do you have that guts in you to walk alone when nobody will come with you? Man, only then you are the leader. Know that the contemporary times in which you lived in may reject you. People may not accept you. They may make fun of you. But if you truly believe in what you think is right and have the courage of conviction to walk even alone, history will judge you rightly. The posterity will judge you rightly. How many multitudes of examples like this we have seen in our lives? Savarkar was condescendingly put down by those political parties and leaders of that time. Ambedkar was considered to be, Ambedkar lost an election. Ambedkar was not encouraged. Ambedkar's ideas were seen to be ahead of his times. But today, all across the country, you are seeing hundreds of books being written on Savarkar, hundreds of books being written on Ambedkar, Savarkar, people who were earlier shunned from the political contemporaries, their contemporaries. So it is extremely important, friends, to always develop a culture of where we have clarity on what we want to do. Then these titles that you get with your job, the perks that you will get, all of these will matter less, and your focus will more be on how you will achieve what you want to do. In fact, yesterday I had just tweeted that if in our homes, if our parents start asking children, you remember in every household when we are young, people ask us, our parents ask us, relatives ask us, beta, what do you want to be when you become big? आप क्या बनना चाहते हो बड़े होकर के, right? And the answer is मैं teacher बनना चाहता हूँ, professor बनना चाहता हूँ, police बनना चाहता हूँ. When we are really small, children, we generally want to be police because police is seen to be having power, right? So generally these are things we say, but culturally we have never asked or encouraged our children on what is it that they want to work on, what is it that they want to do. So if we focus our energies on what we want to do than what we want to become, then life will be much easier. Clarity will be there in what we want to do. You will derive great amount of courage, of conviction, because you will know what is it exactly that you want to do. These, my dear friends, in my reflection and my very short experience have been the 10 important factors, 10 important lessons that we all can draw from the world of politics and governance as important lessons in leadership and management. These are some things that I have arrived at upon my reflection, but all of you are studying management and leadership as a course. So I'm sure you will all be even more capable of understanding these aspects and nuances of governance than I am, because I'm only a lay practitioner of political activism and an observer keenly of how these things are done. So I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity. I know I have shot my time by already. Thank you, Parth. Thank you, Shubham, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, everybody, and wish all of you the very best.